Have you found your dream job as a developer? Or are you stuck in an unfulfilling job? On WeAreDevelopers.com, you find over 1,000 jobs in Europe that fit the tech stack that you want to work with, and salaries go up to $130K. All you have to do is create a free profile, and you automatically get matched with jobs that fit your requirements. So what are you waiting for? Create your free profile and let companies apply to you now.
Zeiss?
I think you should go to Zeiss.
Zeiss Digital Partners.
Be amazed of knowledge, industries, manufacturing, optics, hardware, software,
AR, VR,
Machine Learning,
infrastructure.
Ich will nicht aufstehen und irgendwie mir denken, scheiße, ich muss meinen Job machen, sondern was kann ich heute machen?
You will make it happen. Do it.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Who's already been outside and enjoyed some of the food that the food trucks have to offer? Quite a few of you. Other people might be getting a little bit hungry, but thank you for being here at the moment. Now, about 4 years or so ago, I got to host a blockchain conference in Moscow. And there was one of the speakers there whose sole job it was to just read blockchain white papers. And they told me that 99% of all of the white papers were absolute and complete garbage. So if you measure that compared to all of the hype that was around these white papers, you know, there's let's say that there's more hype than there actually is substance. And our next talk is actually going to be about that subject. It's going to be a little bit wider than blockchain. It's going to be all about Web3, and it's going to be a developer's journey through Web3, separating the hype from the substance. So we're actually going to have the co-founder of Tezos up on stage here in a bit. They're also a sponsor. They have the Hacker Lounge over here. Who here has been to the Hacker Lounge already? A couple of you. And then of those that went, is the rumor true? Can you actually get some vouchers for some food and drinks? Who here has had a voucher from the Hacker Lounge? Nobody? Ooh, that's a bad rumor then. Apologies for spreading it. Now let's raise the roof and make some noise for our next speaker, the amazing Arthur Brightman.
All right. Hi, everyone. Did we get the slides on there? Oh, wait. Wait a second. Maybe I need to do this myself? Nope. All right. Oh, there we go. OK, developers' journeys through Web3, separating hype from substance. And I would say it's almost a little dirty sometimes using the word Web3. There's something great about it. There's something I love about it that inspires me. And there's also something that's really, really bad. So I'll explain a little bit what I mean by that. Let's start with the web to begin with, or even before the web. Let's just start with internet. My first time on the internet, and I'm not an old timer by any means. I got on the net maybe like in 1998, but it was still very much centered on protocols. HTTP, FTP, NNTP. I love using Usenet, and it was. I wouldn't say it was a web completely of peers, because there were still people running servers. Not everyone was running their own server, right? But there was still this idea that you created your homepage and you would host it, and it would be your page. You controlled it. There wasn't all of the walled gardens that we've seen. And if you have to wonder why did we get from this state of the internet to something with a lot of walled gardens, like Facebook, for example, or other social media sites. I think the reason is a lot of it is spam. I would say was a big problem if you look at Usenet. It was really, really hard to control it, and the way that spam was controlled, and I would say content curation and search, you can almost put them on the same continuum in one sense. It's like there's a lot of information out there, and you only want to see some of it. So some of it you definitely want to see that's spam. But even among the information that's not outright spam, you still need some form of curation. And so search, that I think that bred Google, and spam with Gmail, for example. So a lot of this openness closed down into these walled gardens. And while I would say the promise of having a lot of creation, of having a lot of user-generated content was fulfilled, it was fulfilled behind walls. If you look at most of the successful social media companies, they started out by having very open APIs. And having these open APIs is great because you bring developers. Right? Many developers wrote very successful applications for Facebook or for Twitter. When the API were open, it's great. It's saying, look, we're going to create a platform. Everyone's welcome. Everyone should build on our platform. And as soon as a platform starts being built, they close the door. They say, actually, you know what? We're going to capture the value ourselves. Same thing if you're looking at app stores today, which charge something like 30% of transaction fees. You're not getting a service that's really worth 30%. It's just, rent extraction. So can we break out of this? Can we create a system where somehow you can credibly have an open platform? You can have an open platform that says, you should build here. You should invest your time. You should invest your equity. You should invest your sweat into building an application on that platform, on that protocol that is going to be open for everyone, that you're going to control. That's not going to be taken away from you. And that is, I would say at its best, the promise of Web3. And of course, everyone who talks about it today talks about it in the context of blockchains and cryptocurrency. And I think that is an important part of it, but it's by no means all of it. There's a lot that can be done, without having a blockchain at all. I think that's the first thing to say. It's about having open protocols. It's about, I would say, using cryptography and using attestations of identity, for example. So there's a lot that can be done very, very simply with distributed hash tables and with simple web-based mechanisms, and that shouldn't be forgotten. I would say, if you look at a so-called Web3 dApp today, 90% of it is regular web development. 90% of it is having a good UX and having a good server, is having all of these good things. But there is a component of it that connects to blockchain, and I think there is a real use case here. There's a real value of using decentralized ledger. And the value comes from the decentralization. The value comes from the governance. You basically have some control over an application as a developer, and you want to relinquish that control. You want to give it away, and you want to say, no matter what I do, I can't take something away from my users. Now, when I said that it was a little dirty, is that because we've seen a lot of nonsense in the Web3 space. I don't think building an open internet necessarily goes through people having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for buying a feature that somehow is going to give them access to something maybe in a year. I don't want to cast stones specifically, but less, I would say, enthused about this as I am about the promise of the former. The reason we see the latter is, I think, there's two components. One is that there's been an evolution of speculation in crypto markets over the past year, and I think that when the fever runs so high, it's very, very easy for people to get sidetracked and look at these things, as opposed to looking at the substance. Now, that doesn't mean that the substance isn't there. That doesn't mean there isn't meat on this bone. The second aspect, I would say, is also because today, as a technology, blockchains don't really scale that well. We've had a gamut of different technologies. The Tezos blockchain itself almost increased its throughput by a factor of 10 over the past couple of years through upgrades. But even that is still limited. It's still very expensive to use the systems. And when you want to have something at a scale where you're going to have millions of users, even small costs start compounding. So those two aspects, I think, are going to change. First, I would say, over time, the wheat gets separated from the chaff, and applications that provide real value to users are going to persist and are going to be seen for the value that they bring. And the second also is going to happen. For a long time, I would say people have argued that, blockchains cannot scale, it's not possible. Maybe you've even heard of the scaling trilemma, which says that you cannot have a blockchain that's going to be secure, decentralized, and have high throughput at the same time. Except in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of research happening, and there actually are now engineering-ready solutions to scale. And there's a lot of developers working on Tezos who are implementing such solutions. So Tezos is going to scale. We won't be the only blockchain that scale. I think we'll be one of the first one that does, but others are going to scale. So scale is possible and scale is coming. And I think that's going to change a lot the type of applications that people look for on these platforms. I also want to walk you a little bit through a story, because I think it really demonstrates the power. It's very easy to be I think it's very easy to be a cynic in this space and to say, it's all nonsense. But there are real stories that I think that shows the power of this. Tezos over the past year and a half has been a very, very popular marketplace for digital art. And a lot of artists came to the platform and used its low fees and its welcoming community to create art and sell it. So it's a thriving market. And again, I think it's very different from, if you've heard about NFTs through the press, for example, the type of thing that you've seen, I think, is very different from the type of activity that has been taking place on the Tezos blockchain. And a lot of it came out of a small project that came out of a hackathon initially in Brazil called Hackathon Nunc. And Hackathon Nunc was this platform where artists could come in, create their art, sell it to collectors, a lot of artists trading with other artists as well. It was one of the most popular platforms across not just the Tezos ecosystem, but all ecosystem combined. Extremely popular. And at some point, the developer behind it decided that, I don't want to do this anymore. This was fun. I don't want to run it. I'm not interested in doing this. So he pulled the plug and deleted the entire website. And then the website was back up in about an hour and a half. And the reason behind it is that, first of all the code was open source, so that matters. The second is that all of the art was on a distributed hash table, IPFS. All of the ownership records were on a decentralized blockchain. So I think this really demonstrates that there was no control. Like anyone could actually come in and run a front end for this. The front end was open source. So what had been created was not a company. It was a protocol, and it's now striving under a different name. The TEIA I think is one of the successors to it, but there's been others that have popped up in its wake. But I think it's really, really fantastic because it demonstrates that this is not just talk. Now you'll hear, oh well, in theory, if you built your application and then the developer decided they didn't want to, care about it and what might happen in a couple of years. This is real. Like this has actually happened, and it demonstrated the power of doing this. So that's why I'm excited about it, because you can build real applications and you can give a guarantee to the developers coming in your platform that they can actually stay on the platform. They're not going to be kicked off. I think that's extremely valuable, and that comes from governance. So Tezos itself is a blockchain that's been thought about from the beginning with governance at its core. If you look at the process by which blockchains have evolved historically, you can start with Bitcoin, for example. So Bitcoin started out very simply with an algorithm, and then the creators said, look, the rules are set in stone. We're probably never going to change them. It is what it is. It would be grand if we could have future innovation, but it's probably not really possible. And that's been the ethos of the chain for a long time. Other projects have decided to use fork-based governance. Now, fork-based governance is something that's quite popular in the open source world. If you have one piece of software, but it's two different directions, two different ideas for taking this open source piece of software, you make a copy, you run two different versions, and there you have it. It doesn't work when you want to have something that records ownership, because then you duplicate ownership. And the way this was dealt with in Tezos was by having a governance procedure. So there's no upgrade to the Tezos blockchain that doesn't happen without a vote of the stakeholders. So these votes are typically very participative. We have a large community of people, and over 60% get involved into the voting process. Upgrades are adopted with a 80% supermajority, and that has happened already 10 times on a blockchain. So it's something, upgrading is something we've been quite good at. And just as a side effect of having this governance procedure, independently from the governance, I think it's been a forcing function in terms of development in having easy upgrades. So it's been one of our big strengths. But I also think that besides the technical merit of being able to upgrade, the governance ethos is something that has brought a lot of developers. So what can be built in Web3? There's a lot of things. Obviously, the digital art space has been big, but I would say anything that involves users interacting, anything that involves social media, is I would say quite attractive. Anything that can involve user-created content, where the user wants to keep ownership of their content, where the user wants to be in charge, as opposed to giving all the rights to that content to whatever platform they're building on. Those are attractive use cases. As a developer, looking to build something like this, like I've said, 90% of your work is going to be around web development. This is about, the web is still the front end and the UI to most of the application you're using today. That is true of most classical applications, but it's also true of these decentralized Web3 applications. Behind the scene, in general, you have several components. So one can be smart contracts. These are programs that reside on a blockchain and are going to interact with the main front end. So they can verify ownerships, they can change ownerships, they can unlock access. And then behind the scene, you have what is typically called an indexer. So this indexer is looking at events happening on the blockchain. They're looking at what people do, and then they provide data to the server. It's often very popular to build applications which are almost serverless. In some sense, you're building a web page. And the web page communicates to some generic servers that tell you about the state of the chain underlying, and you can display your application. So it's quite attractive because it can be very, very lightweight. One of the things that we do offer in Tezos is the ability to write smart contracts in a way that is more secure than it's typically done. Again, we've been in an environment where people have not paid close attention to the security risk inherent in blockchains. I think it's because there's been so much evolution and because it's been small in terms of users. But as these applications grow, as they become more mainstream, security is going to become much more important. So if you're interested in building such application, I would really encourage you to check out the booth. We have a Tezos booth that's located right outside of this room, and we have a few workshops. So these workshops can walk you through how to write smart contracts, what are the different programming languages you can use, what are the different techniques you can use. They can teach you the different libraries that you can be using, and they can show you sample applications and some successful projects that have been launched on the Tezos blockchain. What I find really interesting in his journey is that I would say back in early 2021, we had a great technology, we had a great foundation, but there weren't that many users. I'm not just talking about Tezos, I'm talking about blockchains in general. It was still very barren. It was still a lot of technology being built, almost like a castle in the sky, saying like, well, this is nice, but is anyone going to use it? And over the past year, we've seen a lot more actual usage. We've seen a lot more people actually find value, besides using cryptocurrencies for payments or besides using for speculation. We've seen people actually derive value and actually build meaningful applications on top of those. And the number of users started growing. We saw the number of our smart contract calls, for example, go from 100,000 to over 6 million a month. So this is real growth, and this is growth that I think is happening independently of the hype. So whenever you hear about blockchain and Web3 and you say, you look and you say, well, that doesn't sound very, very serious. Know that there's real application out there and there are real builders just like you who are building on this. All right. Thank you very much. And I think we have some time for questions now.
Thank you very, very much. I think that was great. Now, if you have any questions, please send them in. The first question is by Martin, and he asks, what is my incentive as a company to relinquish control of my platform and data?
Yeah, so your incentive as a company to relinquish that is to attract more people. In some sense, it's making a commitment. So you're saying, look, build on my platform, and I'm going to give you some guarantees that other platforms aren't going to give you. If you have a monopoly, then you have no incentive of relinquishing any of that. You should just keep it. You should just build it if you have a monopoly. But if you're competing with other people, that can be a competitive advantage, where you're saying, you're still in charge.
And Felix asks, what is Tezos building on? Solidity, ?
So Tezos is not building on Solidity. Tezos is a layer 1 blockchain, just like Ethereum is a layer 1 blockchain. So we're not built on Ethereum. We're built instead of Ethereum, and I think we have quite a bit of advantages. Ethereum, for example, uses proof of work, which uses large amount of energy. We do not. We use proof of stake. And in terms of languages, programming languages available on Tezos, you have languages like JS-Lego, which are similar to TypeScript, SmartPy, which is similar to Python. So there's a variety of languages you can use to program on Tezos.
Excellent. Do you feel like for the future of many blockchains, proof of stake is going to be the main one?
Yeah, I think proof of stake has largely won. If you look at almost every new blockchain project today is launching with proof of stake. We were a pioneer. I think it was very important for us that Tezos would launch from day one using proof of stake. Other people talk about it. We're actually walking the walk, and we have since 2018.
Do you feel like there's an opportunity for other proof of work blockchains to move over to the same principles, or not?
Other proof of stake blockchains?
Other the proof of work blockchains to move over to proof of stake.
Well, there seems to be very little interest in the Bitcoin community overall in moving to proof of stake. There seems to be a lot of interest in the Ethereum community in moving to proof of stake. They've been talking about it a lot since 2016. Cool. I think eventually they'll probably move, but it certainly has taken them a lot of time.
Excellent. Now, anonymous user asks, how is the ROI of sponsoring Manchester United?
Well, that remains to be seen.
Good answer. And then we have Nicholas, who asks, what is your opinion? Can centralized public authorities like governments and central banks best embrace Web3? And what's in it for the social benefits they campaign for?
Can governments embrace Web3? I mean, governments often try to embrace new technology, and it's always a little cringe until, and then they do it maybe properly later with a 20-year lag. Mm-hmm. So, we'll see what happens. But I would say that, by and large, if the value is to relinquish power and to show that you don't have control, that goes, I think, against the instinct of a lot of governments.
Right. Yeah.
So we'll see if they have an interest in doing that. I hope so, but remains to be seen.
Let me see. Wow, you are all upvoting different things. Okay, so Andreas asks, how can we as community prevent the emergence of centralized services on top of blockchains, for example, OpenSea?
Well, I don't think you should prevent the emergence of centralized services. I think what you should do as developers and community is build decentralized services which are better. Ultimately, the consumer at the end doesn't care per se about decentralization. What they care about is having a product that works, a product that's reliable, that can trust, that is aligned with their values. So if you can provide that, and if you can provide it better with a decentralized product than you can with a centralized one, then that's fantastic.
Do you feel like user experience is always going to be a challenge when coming up with a decentralized product versus a centralized one?
Absolutely, there's friction that's involved. A lot of the friction goes down. One of the things that we've done in the Tezos ecosystem a lot is rely on integrations to make it easy for people who don't have crypto accounts like wallets to connect directly using their Twitter account, for example, or using a Reddit account. So that's a really, really good UX and adoption hack that I think has worked very well for onboarding users. But there are other options. I think you can reduce the friction, and you should work to reduce the friction. But it's a challenge.
Cool. One that's close to my heart by Lucas, who asks, what about proof of randomness in case of quantum computing?
Well, quantum computing seems pretty far off. Obviously, it's, I can't say that the NSA or Chinese intelligence doesn't have a secret quantum computer in the basement. But even if we assume that they have a lot of lead over private industry for quantum computing, the number of qubits you have is still many orders of magnitudes away from what you would need to actually be able to break those systems. That's number one. Number two, I think if and when the threat of this being possible gets more likely, there are many quantum-resistant algorithms that can be used for any of that. So, for example, with hash functions, all you have to do is to double the length of the hash function, and you have the same security under a quantum computer. There are signature schemes which are resistant. So, it's not a main technical challenge. It's a little more cumbersome to use the quantum-resistant stuff. So, you don't want to do it unless you're really, really convinced that they have this type of technology.
Right.
It's also the case that I think today blockchains are small enough that it would not be worth it for an intelligence agency to somehow tip their hand that they have quantum computing,
right,
just to go after blockchains. Not worth it.
Do you feel like proof of stake doesn't have any of these issues that proof of work has with regards to quantum computing? Or do you feel like the similar problems?
No, it's pretty much the same.
Okay, that's good to know. Let me see, I think time for one more question. Anonymous wants you to agree with them. Is pure on-chain governance bad?
Is pure on-chain governance bad? I think there's always going to be an off-chain component, right? And if you look at the on-chain governance of Tezos, for example, where you have long time periods. The reason there's a long time period is if something crazy happens on-chain, you have, I would say, an off-chain net.
Yeah.
That can protect you. You have a 2 months period. So if somehow by some reason a proposal that walks the entire protocol into a wall gets voted, there's this very, very long time where people can consciously decide to change the code base and decide maybe we should not walk into a wall. So I think being an extremist in that and saying like no, let's just make it 100% on chain. I don't think it's optimal. But for some people don't have a choice. So when you're layer 1, you can do that. When you're building a smart contract on layer 1,
Right.
then it's a little, and if you want to have on-chain governance, you're going to be much more beholden to that because you can't fork the underlying platform. So that's a tougher problem to crack.
That's a good one to think about. Thank you so much. Give another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Everybody.
You
Now,
stuck in an unfulfilling job. On Weird.
Short break. See you back in 10 minutes. Bye-bye.
Up to 130K.